We're just days away from reaching 1,000 subscribers. If we hit this goal in the next 15 days, we'll be able to keep the channel running and continue bringing you these stories. Your subscription makes all the difference. It's quick and helps us enormously. The Duke's Lost Heir. Chapter 1. The Hungry Boy. The autumn morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Yorkshire like a shroud, obscuring the ancient stone walls that divided the modest farmstead from the grand estates beyond. It was October 1851, and Martha Whitmore stood at her kitchen window, kneading bread dough with hands weathered by 30 years of honest labour. At 42, she was a woman who had learned that life offered more hardships than comforts, but her heart remained as generous as her circumstances were humble. Her small cottage, with its thatched roof and whitewashed walls, sat on the edge of what had once been prosperous farmland. Since her husband Thomas had died 3 years prior, Martha struggled to maintain even this modest holding. The sheep that grazed her few acres barely provided enough wool and meat to sustain her through the harsh Yorkshire winters, and the small garden behind her cottage yielded just enough vegetables to keep hunger at bay. It was as she watched the morning light creep across her property that she first spotted him, a small figure moving hesitantly along the stone wall that bordered her land. A boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, dressed in clothing that had once been fine, but now hung in tatters. His dark hair was unkempt, his face gaunt with hunger, and he moved with the careful wariness of a wild creature that had learned to fear human contact. Martha set down her dough and wiped her hands on her apron. In all her years living on this isolated farm, she had never seen a child wandering alone in such obvious distress. The nearest village was 3 miles away, and the great estates that dominated this part of Yorkshire were known for their high walls and strict security. How had this waif come to be here? And where were his parents? She opened her kitchen door and stepped into the crisp morning air. "Child," she called gently, not wanting to startle him into flight, "are you lost?" The boy froze, like a deer caught in an open meadow, his large dark eyes fixing on her with a mixture of fear and desperate longing. She could see now that he was indeed very young, with delicate features that spoke of gentle breeding despite his current ragged state. "I'm sorry," he said in a voice barely above a whisper, his accent refined despite his obvious distress. "I didn't mean to trespass. I was looking for..." "For what, sweetheart?" Martha kept her voice soft and non-threatening, the way she had learned to speak to injured animals. "Food," he admitted, his small face flushing with shame. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Martha's heart clenched at the confession. Whatever circumstances had brought this child to her door, no boy should wander the countryside hungry and alone. "What's your name, child?" "William," he replied hesitantly. William Ashford." The surname meant nothing to Martha, but something about the boy's manner suggested breeding well above her own station. His speech was educated, his posture naturally erect despite his exhaustion, and even in his current state there was an innate dignity about him that spoke of careful upbringing. "Well, William Ashford," she said with the matter-of-fact kindness that had characterized her entire life, "I was just about to have breakfast. Would you like to join me?" The transformation in the child's face was immediate and heartbreaking. His eyes filled with tears of gratitude, and for a moment he looked so young and vulnerable that Martha wanted nothing more than to gather him in her arms and protect him from whatever had brought him to such desperate straits. "Yes, please," he whispered, if it wouldn't be too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Martha assured him, stepping back to let him enter her humble kitchen. "Come in out of the cold, child. You look half frozen." William entered her cottage with the careful politeness of a boy raised to proper manners, wiping his feet despite their obvious need and offering a small bow that would have been perfectly appropriate in a duke's drawing room. Martha noted these details with growing curiosity, but she kept her questions to herself. The child needed food and warmth more than he needed interrogation. She seated him at her small wooden table and quickly assembled a meal from her modest stores. Fresh bread still warm from the oven, butter churned from her own cow's cream, eggs from her chickens, and milk rich and sweet. It was simple fare but wholesome and nourishing. William's eyes widened at the sight of so much food. "Are you certain you can spare all this?" he asked with touching concern. "I don't want to take what you need for yourself." "Child," Martha said firmly, setting the plate before him, "there's always enough in this house for one more. Now eat up before it gets cold." She watched with a mixture of satisfaction and growing alarm as William devoured the meal with the desperate efficiency of someone who had gone hungry for far too long. Despite his obvious starvation, he maintained careful table manners, using his fork and knife properly and pausing to say a proper grace before beginning. "William," Martha said gently as he finished the last of his milk, "can you tell me how you came to be wandering alone? Where are your parents?" The boy's face clouded with pain and confusion. "I don't know," he admitted. "I remember living in a big house with servants and beautiful things. But then there was shouting, and men in dark coats came, and someone said I had to go away. I've been walking for days, sleeping in barns and hedgerows." Martha frowned. The story suggested a family of considerable means, the kind of people who didn't simply lose track of their children. "Do you remember the name of this big house, or the town where it was located?" William shook his head miserably. "I know it was called Thornfield Hall, and there were gardens and a lake, but I don't know how to get back there, and His voice broke. "I don't think they want me anymore." Thornfield Hall. Martha had heard the name whispered in village gossip, one of the great estates somewhere to the north, owned by nobility so removed from common folk that they might as well have been mythical beings. But why would a child from such a place be wandering the Yorkshire countryside alone and abandoned? "Well," she said practically, "until we can sort this out, you'll stay here with me. I've got a small room upstairs that will do nicely, and there's always work to be done on a farm for willing hands." You'd let me stay?" William's voice was filled with wonder. "Even though I have nothing to offer in return?" "Child," Martha said, her voice warm with affection, "you've already given me something precious, the chance to help someone who needs it. That's worth more than any coin." And so began an arrangement that would transform both their lives. For the next 2 months, William became Martha's shadow, helping with farm chores with an eagerness that spoke of genuine gratitude. Despite his obvious gentle breeding, he threw himself into the work of caring for the animals, mending fences, and helping with the endless tasks that kept the small farm running. Martha, for her part, found herself cherishing the boy's presence more than she had expected. His quick intelligence and natural curiosity made him an apt pupil in the ways of farming, and his unfailing courtesy and genuine appreciation for every kindness made him the most pleasant companion she had ever known. But even as they settled into their comfortable routine, Martha couldn't shake the feeling that William's story was far from over. A boy with his obvious breeding and education didn't simply disappear without someone somewhere missing him desperately. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, the most powerful duke in northern England was turning his vast resources toward finding the lost child, or that when he finally traced William to her humble cottage, both her life and the boy's would change in ways neither could possibly imagine. Chapter 2. The Search Intensifies. While Martha Whitmore and young William settled into their peaceful routine on the small Yorkshire farm, 30 miles to the north, Blackmore Castle was in complete upheaval. Adrian Blackthorne, the Duke of Blackmore, paced the length of his oak-panelled study like a caged wolf, his usually composed features etched with desperate worry and barely controlled rage. At 36, the Duke was a man accustomed to command and control. His vast estates stretched across 3 counties. His political influence reached into the highest circles of government, and his wealth was legendary throughout England. But all of his power and resources seemed useless in the face of the one crisis that mattered most. His 8-year-old son had vanished without a trace 2 months ago. "Any word from the investigators?" he demanded of his secretary, James Morrison, who had just entered with the morning's correspondence. "Nothing yet, Your Grace," Morrison replied carefully. "But Inspector Hartwell believes he may have found a lead. A farmer near Thirsk reported seeing a young boy matching Master William's description, begging for food at several cottages in the area." Adrian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The thought of his son, his heir, his only child, reduced to begging for scraps was almost more than he could bear. "How many men do we have searching the Thirsk area?" 12 mounted men, Your Grace, plus the local constabulary. They're conducting a systematic search of every farm, cottage and village in a 20-mile radius." "It's not enough," Adrian said grimly. "Double the number, triple it if necessary. I want every stone turned, every door knocked upon. My son is out there somewhere, and by God, I will find him." The Duke's anguish was compounded by guilt that ate at him like acid. William's disappearance was not the result of some random tragedy, but the direct consequence of Adrian's own political enemies and personal failings. His late wife's brother, Lord Pemberton, had been contesting William's legitimacy for years, claiming that Adrian's brief marriage to Lady Catherine had been invalid due to some obscure technicality. When Pemberton had finally succeeded in getting a court to review the case, Adrian had been forced to travel to London for weeks of legal proceedings. During his absence, Pemberton had bribed several of the castle's servants and convinced them to help him kidnap William, intending to hide the boy away until the inheritance could be settled in his own favour. The plan had gone awry when the coach transporting William had overturned during a storm. In the chaos that followed, the boy had escaped into the Yorkshire countryside, and despite Pemberton's frantic efforts to recapture him, William had simply vanished. Pemberton himself was now in custody awaiting trial, but his crime had achieved its purpose. The heir to the Blackmore dukedom was lost, possibly forever. "Your Grace," Morrison said hesitantly, "perhaps you should consider offering a larger reward. The current sum of £50 is substantial, but if we were to increase it to, say, £100... "Make it 500, Adrian said without hesitation, "and let it be known that anyone who has aided my son, who has shown him kindness or given him shelter, will be rewarded handsomely, not punished." £500, Your Grace? Morrison's eyebrows rose. It was a fortune that would set a working family up for life. "My son is worth infinitely more than money," Adrian replied fiercely. "And Morrison, send riders to every village, church and market square in the region. I want William's description posted everywhere, along with the reward notice. Someone, somewhere, has seen my boy." As Morrison hurried away to carry out these instructions, Adrian moved to the window that overlooked the castle's extensive grounds. Somewhere out there, his son was either thriving under the care of kind strangers or suffering in ways that didn't bear contemplation. Either possibility filled him with an anguish that no amount of wealth or power could ease. Meanwhile, in Martha's cozy kitchen, William was helping to prepare the midday meal, completely unaware of the massive search operation that was slowly but steadily moving in his direction. Over the past weeks, he had grown strong and healthy under Martha's care, his hollow cheeks filling out and his ragged clothes replaced by simple but clean garments that Martha had sewn for him. "Martha," he said as he carefully set the table with her modest collection of earthenware plates. "Do you think my family is still looking for me?" Martha paused in her stirring of the soup pot. Choosing her words carefully, she had grown to love this child as if he were her own, but she knew that somewhere, someone must be missing him desperately. "I'm certain they are, sweetheart. Families don't stop looking for the people they love." "But what if they think I'm dead? What if they've given up?" "Oh, child," Martha said, kneeling down to take his small hands in hers. "No parent ever gives up hope of finding their child. Trust me on that." What she didn't tell William was that she had been making her own discreet inquiries. On her weekly trips to the village market, she had carefully questioned other farmers and travellers about any news of a missing boy. So far, her questions had yielded nothing but concerned shakes of the head and suggestions that she contact the local constabulary. Martha had resisted involving the authorities thus far, partly from her natural distrust of officials, and partly from a growing reluctance to give up the boy who had brought such joy to her lonely life. But she knew that her selfishness was ultimately harmful to William, who deserved to be reunited with his true family. "William," she said gently, "I think it's time we visited the constable in Thirsk. Perhaps he has heard something about your family." The boy's face showed conflicting emotions, hope and fear warring in his dark eyes. What if they don't want me back? What if the reason I was sent away was because I did something wrong? "Sweetheart," Martha said firmly, "you are the kindest, most well-behaved child I've ever known. Whatever happened to separate you from your family, it wasn't your fault." "And if they can't find my real family," William asked in a small voice, Could I stay here with you? Forever?" Martha's heart clenched at the question. Nothing would make her happier than keeping this precious boy as her own, but she knew it wasn't right. William deserved his birthright, whatever that might be, and she had no legal claim to him. "We'll see what the constable says first," she replied diplomatically. "But William, I want you to know that no matter what happens, you'll always have a place in my heart. Always." Dardine. As they finished preparing their simple meal together, neither Martha nor William could have imagined that at that very moment one of the Duke's search parties was questioning a farmer less than 5 miles away, and that the net of the investigation was slowly but inexorably closing in on their peaceful cottage. The reunion that was coming would bring joy beyond measure, but it would also test the bonds of love that had formed between a lonely woman and a lost boy. Bonds that would prove stronger than social barriers and more enduring than the vast differences in their stations in life. Chapter 3. The Discovery. The first sign that their peaceful world was about to change came on a crisp December morning when William spotted riders approaching along the country lane that led to Martha's cottage. They were still distant figures on the horizon, but something about their bearing and the quality of their horses suggested they were not ordinary travellers. "Martha," William called from his position at the kitchen window, where he had been helping her prepare preserves for winter storage. "There are men coming, fine gentlemen, by the look of them." Martha wiped her hands on her apron and joined him at the window. 3 riders approached at a steady canter, their dark coats and formal bearing marking them clearly as men of authority. Her heart sank as she recognized the lead rider, Inspector Hartwell of the Yorkshire Constabulary, a man whose reputation for thoroughness was matched only by his complete lack of imagination or compassion. "William," she said quietly, "go upstairs to your room and stay there until I call for you." "But why? Have I done something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, you've done nothing wrong at all. But I think these men may be here about you, and I want to speak with them first." William's face paled as understanding dawned. "They've found me, haven't they? My family has found me." Martha knelt down to his level, taking his small hands in hers. I don't know yet, child, but if they have, you must remember that you are loved, no matter where you go. And I—" her voice caught slightly—"I will never forget the joy you've brought to my life." As the riders drew closer, William obediently went upstairs, though Martha could hear his soft footsteps pacing anxiously overhead. She straightened her simple dress, smoothed her greying hair, and prepared to face whatever was coming. Inspector Hartwell dismounted with the crisp efficiency of a military man, though his two companions remained mounted. Martha recognized them as local landowners who served as magistrates, men of property and influence, who would view her cottage and circumstances with barely concealed disdain. "Mrs. Whitmore," Inspector Hartwell said without preamble, "I am conducting an investigation on behalf of His Grace, the Duke of Blackmore. We have reason to believe you may be harboring a missing child." Martha's mouth went dry, but she kept her voice steady. "Inspector, I'm not sure what you mean. I live alone here." "Mrs. Whitmore," one of the mounted magistrates interjected with obvious impatience, "we have multiple reports of a young boy being seen at this cottage. The Duke is offering a substantial reward for the return of his son, but harboring the child unlawfully is a serious crime." His son. Martha felt the world shift beneath her feet. William, her William, was the son of a duke. "Master William Blackthorne," Inspector Hartwell confirmed, studying her face carefully. 8 years old, dark hair, well-spoken, despite his current circumstances. He disappeared 2 months ago following a criminal conspiracy, and we have traced him to this area. Martha's mind reeled. William Blackthorne. Not William Ashford, as he had told her, but the heir to one of the most powerful dukedoms in England. No wonder his speech and manners had seemed so refined, so far above his humble circumstances. "Mrs. Whitmore," Inspector Hartwell continued, his voice gentler now that he saw her obvious shock, "if the boy is here, no harm will come to you. His Grace has made it clear that anyone who has shown kindness to his son will be rewarded, not punished." Martha struggled with the decision. She could deny knowledge of William, send these men away, and continue their peaceful life together. But she knew it would be wrong. Whatever her feelings for the boy, he had a father who was searching for him desperately, and a birthright that was his by law and blood. "William," she called softly, "come down, sweetheart." The sound of small feet on the wooden stairs seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. When William appeared in the kitchen doorway, the change in the officials was immediate and dramatic. Inspector Hartwell's stern expression softened with relief, while the two magistrates straightened in their saddles with obvious respect. "Master William," Inspector Hartwell said formally, offering a bow that would have been appropriate for royalty, "your father has been searching for you everywhere." William looked between the official and Martha, his young face showing a mixture of hope and confusion. "My father, the Duke is truly my father." "Indeed he is, young master, and he is beside himself with worry for your safety." "But the men who took me," William said hesitantly, "they said I wasn't really his son. They said it wasn't legal." Inspector Hartwell's expression darkened. "Those men were criminals acting on behalf of your uncle. Lord Pemberton, the courts have ruled in your father's favour. You are the rightful heir to Blackmore, Master William, and your father has been moving heaven and earth to find you." Martha watched this exchange with a heart that was breaking and soaring simultaneously. Her William, her precious boy, was not lost and abandoned as they had believed. He was loved, sought after, claimed by one of the most powerful men in England. But knowing this only made the approaching separation more painful. "Mrs. Whitmore," Inspector Hartwell said, turning back to her, "His Grace wishes to speak with you personally. He's following a day behind us with his full entourage. He wanted to ensure the boy's safety first, but he's most eager to thank you for your kindness to his son. The Duke is coming here." Martha's voice was barely a whisper. "To my cottage." "Yes, ma'am. And if I may say so, you need have no fear of His Grace's gratitude. Master William appears healthy and well cared for, and his father will not forget such kindness." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of multiple carriages and mounted riders could be heard approaching along the lane. Martha looked out the window to see a procession that was magnificent beyond anything she had ever witnessed. 6 carriages bearing elaborate coats of arms, dozens of liveried outriders, and an escort that would have suited a royal progress. "That will be His Grace now," Inspector Hartwell said unnecessarily. William ran to Martha's side, taking her hand with the instinctive need for comfort that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. "Martha, I'm frightened. What if he's angry with me for running away?" "Oh, sweetheart," Martha said, kneeling to embrace him one last time. "No father could be anything but overjoyed to have you back safe and sound." Well, as the magnificent procession came to a halt outside her humble cottage, Martha tried to prepare herself for a meeting that would change everything. The Duke of Blackmore was coming to reclaim his son, and with him would come a world of privilege and responsibility that would take William far from her simple cottage forever. But she also knew that whatever happened next, she had been blessed beyond measure by the time she had been given with this remarkable child. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Duke would prove to be a man who understood the value of the love that had sheltered his son when he needed it most. Chapter 4. The Reunion and Its Consequences. The door of the first carriage opened with ceremonial precision, and Adrian Blackthorne, Duke of Blackmore, stepped down onto the packed earth of Martha's modest farmyard. Even in her simple world, Martha recognized true nobility when she saw it, not in the elaborate coat of arms that decorated his carriage, but in the way he carried himself with unconscious authority and dignity that could not be learned or imitated. The Duke was younger than Martha had expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with the same dark hair and intelligent eyes as William. His clothes spoke of wealth beyond imagination, a greatcoat that probably cost more than Martha earned in a year, boots of leather so fine they gleamed like mirrors, and a bearing that commanded instant respect from every man in his considerable entourage. But what struck Martha most was the barely controlled emotion in his face. This powerful man, who could command armies and influence the fate of nations, looked like nothing so much as a father desperate to hold his child again. "William?" the Duke called softly, his voice carrying clearly across the small distance between the carriage and the cottage door. "Papa." "My Dean." William's cry of recognition and joy shattered the formal atmosphere like a stone through glass. The boy broke free from Martha's side and ran across the farmyard, his small feet flying over the uneven ground as if he had sprouted wings. The reunion that followed was one of the most beautiful sights Martha had ever witnessed. The Duke fell to his knees in the dirt of her farmyard, his expensive clothes forgotten, as he gathered his son into his arms. For long moments neither spoke, the Duke simply holding William as if he could protect him from all the world's dangers through the strength of his embrace alone. "My boy," the Duke whispered, his voice thick with emotion that he made no attempt to hide. "My dear, precious boy, I thought I had lost you forever." "I'm sorry, Papa." William sobbed against his father's shoulder. "I tried to come home, but I didn't know how to find you. I was so scared." "Shh," the Duke soothed, stroking his son's hair with infinite tenderness. "You have nothing to apologize for, William, nothing at all. The fault was mine for not protecting you better." Martha stood in her cottage doorway, tears streaming down her face as she watched the reunion she had both longed for and dreaded. The love between father and son was unmistakable, and she knew that William belonged in this world of privilege and power, not in her simple cottage. But the knowledge didn't make the approaching separation any less painful. After what seemed like an eternity, the Duke finally rose, lifting William in his arms as if the boy weighed nothing at all. His eyes then turned to Martha, and she found herself the focus of an attention so intense it was almost overwhelming. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice carefully controlled but warm with genuine emotion, "I understand that I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid." Martha curtsied awkwardly, suddenly acutely aware of her simple dress and work-worn hands. "Your Grace, I only did what any Christian woman would do. The boy needed help, and I had it to give." The Duke studied her with those intelligent dark eyes, and Martha had the distinct impression that very little escaped his notice. "Inspector Hartwell tells me that you have cared for William as if he were your own son, that you have fed him, clothed him, and given him a home when he had nothing." "It was no hardship, Your Grace. William he's a remarkable child. Any kindness I showed him was returned tenfold." "Papa," William interjected from his position in his father's arms, "Martha saved me. When I was hungry and scared and lost, she took me in and took care of me. She taught me about farming and animals, and she made me feel safe again." The Duke's expression grew even warmer as he listened to his son's earnest defense of the woman who had sheltered him. "Then I owe Mrs. Whitmore more than I can ever express. William, would you mind if I spoke with Mrs. Whitmore privately for a moment?" William nodded solemnly and allowed himself to be set down, though he stayed close to his father's side, as if afraid that too much distance might cause him to disappear again. "Mrs. Whitmore," the Duke said formally, "I would like to offer you a position at Blackmore Castle as William's companion and tutor in practical matters. He speaks so highly of your lessons in farming and animal husbandry that I think such knowledge would serve him well as the future master of extensive agricultural estates." Martha's eyes widened in shock. "Your Grace, I couldn't possibly. I'm just a simple farm woman. I know nothing of castle life or the education of young lords." "You know about kindness," the Duke replied simply. "You know about generosity and compassion, and the sort of character that my son will need if he is to become the man I hope he will be. All the formal education in the world cannot teach what you have already given him. But, Your Grace, the difference in our stations—" "Mrs. Whitmore," the Duke interrupted gently, "stations matter far less than character. You have proven your worth beyond any question of birth or breeding. I would be honored to have you as part of my household." Martha looked at William, who was watching the exchange with obvious hope and anxiety. The thought of being separated from him forever was almost unbearable, but the thought of entering the Duke's world seemed equally impossible. "I would still be able to see William regularly?" she asked hesitantly. "Every day," the Duke assured her. "Your quarters would be in the family wing of the castle, and you would take your meals with the household. You would be a member of the family in all but name. And I could continue to teach him about farming and animals. I would insist upon it. A duke who cannot understand the land that supports his people is no duke at all." Martha felt tears welling in her eyes again as she realized what the Duke was truly offering, not just employment, but a chance to remain a part of William's life. "Your Grace, I would be honored to accept." The smile that crossed the Duke's face transformed his entire appearance, making him look years younger and infinitely more approachable. "Excellent. Then we shall all travel to Blackmore together. William can show you his home, and you can help him settle back into his proper place." As the Duke's servants began making arrangements for Martha's belongings to be packed and transported, William took her hand and looked up at her with shining eyes. "Martha, you're really coming with us? You're really going to stay with me? If you want me to, sweetheart, though I'm afraid I'll be terribly out of place in a castle." "You could never be out of place anywhere," William said with the absolute certainty of childhood. "You're the kindest, most wonderful person in the whole world." The Duke, overhearing this exchange, smiled warmly. "Then she'll fit perfectly at Blackmore, because that's exactly the sort of person our family needs." And so it was that Martha Whitmore, humble farmwoman, found herself climbing into a ducal carriage beside the boy she had come to love as a son. As they rode away from her cottage toward a future she could never have imagined, she marveled at the strange twists of fate that had brought them all together. But perhaps most wonderful of all was the realization that love, the simple, generous love she had shown a hungry child, had indeed been rewarded beyond all measure. Not with gold or position, but with the chance to remain a part of William's life and to help shape the man he would become. The Duke, watching the easy affection between his son and the woman who had saved him, knew that he had gained far more than just his heir's return. He had found the missing piece that would make their family complete. Someone whose love was given freely, without thought of reward, and whose presence would ensure that William grew up understanding the true meaning of nobility. As their carriage rolled through the countryside toward Blackmore Castle, all three passengers looked forward to a future bright with the promise of love, understanding, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing that kindness, once given, creates bonds that time and circumstance cannot break.